Welcome to True Echo, where real struggles meet unbelievable victories. Here, we tell powerful, dramatic, and deeply emotional stories that expose injustice and celebrate the strength of the human spirit. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside, this channel is for you. Today's story is one you'll never forget. It was just past 6:30 p.m. when Naomi Ellis stepped out of the black town car, her heels clicking softly against the cobblestone entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel, a five-star luxury landmark in Chicago's Gold Coast. The sky above glowed with streaks of lavender and amber as the city slipped into evening. Naomi's silhouette against the hotel's gold-accented archway was unmistakable, composed, elegant, and commanding. She adjusted the strap of her briefcase, the same one she'd carried since the day she launched her startup out of a co-working space in the South Loop. Now, that startup had grown into a clean-tech juggernaut worth 9 figures, and this stay in the presidential suite was more than a luxury, it was a mark of triumph. Naomi had just closed a historic European venture deal, securing capital that would expand her company into 4 new international markets. Inside, the lobby was a temple to wealth, polished marble, velvet furnishings, and crystal chandeliers. She walked with quiet confidence, ignoring the way the concierge's smile stiffened at the sight of her. That tension, that momentary flicker of doubt, was nothing new. Black, female, and powerful. A combination too many people still struggled to digest. Dylan, the front desk clerk, blinked twice at the reservation confirmation before confirming, almost surprised, presidential suite, 36th floor, of course. She offered him a polite nod. Paid in full. Corporate rate. 3 months ago. His lips twitched into a strained smile. 15 minutes later, Naomi stood inside her suite, a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline glittering behind her. She poured herself a glass of Pinot Noir and exhaled. Finally. This was a moment to breathe. To own the space she had earned. Then the phone rang. Miss Ellis, Dylan's syrupy voice leaked from the receiver. I hate to disturb you, but we have a VIP guest who's requested the suite you're currently occupying. A long-time platinum member. She was, quite insistent. Naomi set down her glass. No. I'm sorry. Dylan responded, caught off guard. No, I will not vacate the suite. I booked it, paid for it, and I'm staying. The silence on the line was telling. Naomi knew this wasn't over. This wasn't a question. It was a test. A knock followed soon after. She opened the door to find Victoria Langford, mid-50s, platinum blonde, ivory cashmere, and Richard Hayes, the hotel's guest services director. Naomi knew before a word was spoken, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was about perception. Power. Place. Victoria didn't waste time. This suite has always been mine, she said, teeth clenched behind a brittle smile. I've stayed in it every year for over a decade. I expect it to be available. Naomi didn't flinch. There's no mix-up. I reserved it months ago. Victoria's mask slipped. Let's not pretend this is normal. People like you don't belong in this suite. There it was. The venom behind the velvet. Richard stood silent, a coward in a blazer. Naomi didn't shout. She didn't tremble. She simply turned to him and asked, are you going to do something? Or are you going to stand there while I'm insulted for my race? He fumbled, muttering about avoiding conflict. No, Naomi said calmly. You're avoiding discomfort. There's a difference. Victoria scoffed. This is just a stunt. A diversity checkmark. A trick. Naomi leaned forward slightly, her voice a scalpel. Watch your mouth, Mrs. Langford. She shut the door with quiet finality. But she knew Victoria wasn't done. So neither was she. She reached for her phone. And pressed the name already saved in her favorites. Avery Tran, Naomi said when the line picked up. "We've got a problem at the Grand Meridian." Avery Tran didn't need the details, she already knew the tone. "Tell me everything." Naomi recounted it, precisely, concisely. The knock at the door. Victoria Langford's demand. Richard's silence. The slurs disguised as tradition, the veiled insults wrapped in entitlement. Avery's voice tightened. "That's not the first complaint about Langford. She's made a sport of bullying staff and strong-arming sweet assignments. But no one ever challenged her, until now." "I want this documented," Naomi said. "Not just this incident, but how it was handled, or rather, how it wasn't. I want accountability. No apologies, no fruit baskets. Action." "You'll have it," Avery promised. "I'll contact Meridian's executive oversight directly. Give me 15. Naomi hung up, the weight in her chest slowly shifting, not anger, not even disappointment anymore. Resolve. This wasn't about a suite. This was about the way certain people still believed their money entitled them to superiority. She wasn't going to teach Victoria Langford a lesson. She was going to teach the entire system one. 10 minutes later, Naomi's sweet phone rang again. She let it go to voicemail. Then came another knock. She opened the door without a word. Victoria stood alone this time, visibly more rattled, hair slightly disheveled, the champagne confidence gone. Her voice was quieter, but meaner. Venomous. "You really think you're somebody, don't you?" she spat. "A little power, a nice room, and suddenly you think you earned it. You people always think one success makes you untouchable." Naomi didn't reply. "You're a box to be ticked. That's all. A showpiece. This hotel made a mistake letting someone like you sit in a space that wasn't meant for you." Still, Naomi said nothing. "I'm not finished," Victoria hissed. "When I'm done, your name will be blacklisted from every hotel in this chain. I'll make sure of it." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," Victoria snapped. Naomi took one calm step forward. "Then you better get started. Because I already made my call." She shut the door, this time locking it with a quiet, steady click. She returned to her notebook. Leather-bound, simple, and filled with notes. She flipped to a clean page and wrote. Time of call, 7:13 p.m. Name, Victoria Langford. Guest Services Director, Richard Hayes. Incident, racial intimidation, class-based harassment. Action, escalated to Avery Tran, Meridian Executive Oversight. She didn't need a lawyer to make noise. She needed documentation to make change. She wasn't building a complaint, she was building a case. Just then, her phone buzzed. Avery Tran, security briefed. Corporate is moving. Hold tight. A few minutes passed. Another knock, this time, sharp and confident. Naomi opened the door to find two sharply dressed individuals, no name tags, just the unmistakable silver badge of Meridian International Executive Oversight. One held a slim leather tablet, the other a briefcase. They didn't smile. "Miss Ellis," the taller one said, "we've reviewed the call records and your reservation file. Corporate Affairs has been notified. Please remain in your suite while we conduct a full personnel audit." Naomi gave a single nod. Behind them, down the hall, she could already hear whispers. Tension. Unease. Change. Victoria Langford had mistaken her silence for weakness. But Naomi Ellis knew better. Because she hadn't come to the Grand Meridian to be accepted. She had come to take her place, and make sure the door didn't close behind her. Downstairs in the administrative wing of the Grand Meridian, the air had turned heavy. Richard Hayes stood in the galley office, his collar damp with sweat, fumbling nervously with his tie. Across from him, Victoria Langford paced like a storm ready to break, her composure crumbling by the second. "You said she was no one," Victoria hissed. A fluke. A name on a list. Now I've got corporate hounding me like I'm the villain. This is absurd. Richard tried to keep his voice level. Victoria, please. We're looking into everything. No, she snapped. You listen. I built history with this brand. I've spent more money in this hotel than most people earn in a lifetime. And now they're coming at me like I'm some low-tier tourist. Her face twisted. She played the race card. That's all this is. She wants attention, pity, validation. And you stood there and let her throw me out of my room. Richard opened his mouth to respond, but the door burst open before he could speak. The two corporate oversight officers entered without warning. Their presence swallowed the room. The taller one, the same who had spoken to Naomi, didn't even glance at Victoria. Mr. Hayes. Step outside. Now. Richard hesitated only a second before nodding and obeying, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor as he slipped out the door. Victoria stared after him, her voice rising. Don't you dare walk out on me. Tell them she was hostile. Tell them she cursed at me, that she. Mrs. Langford, the woman from corporate said, her tone cool and clinical, we've reviewed your statements, as well as hotel security footage and guest audio recordings. Your behavior tonight was discriminatory and in violation of Meridian's guest conduct policy. Victoria blinked, momentarily stunned. You're serious? Effective immediately, your Platinum Legacy status is revoked. You are also banned from all Meridian properties worldwide. What? She shrieked, staggering back. You can't do that. I've spent over 200 grand across your resorts. My husband, my lawyer, Hill. This is final, the man interrupted. Any further contact with staff will be considered trespassing. The color drained from Victoria's face. For a moment, she stood there frozen, mouth open, rage trembling behind her eyes. Then she snapped. You think she's going to replace me? She barked. That smug little token in heels. Is that the world you want to build? One where legacy and loyalty mean nothing. One where. But security had arrived. Two guards stepped forward, speaking softly but firmly. Ma'am, you need to come with us. Victoria whipped toward them, but they didn't flinch. She took a breath like she might lunge, then let out a long, broken laugh. Let the charity queen have her throne, she spat, venom dripping from every word. Let's see how long your brand survives when people like me walk away. She stormed toward the elevator, screaming the whole way. You think I'll be the last? You think your DI stunt makes you virtuous? You've lost something you can never buy back, your core customer. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. The moment she vanished inside, silence fell like a curtain. Upstairs, Naomi didn't react to the distant echoes of Victoria's tantrum. She sat calmly at the suite's marble desk, reviewing the final clause of her European investment contract. Her hands were steady. Her pen moved without hesitation. She didn't need to witness the fallout. She had already won the only battle that mattered. Her phone buzzed again. A simple message from Avery. Langford banned. Hayes suspended pending review. You've got them rethinking their entire policy manual. Naomi smiled, not out of triumph, but out of relief. This wasn't about revenge. It was about precedent. Another knock came. This one was quiet, polite. She opened the door. The taller executive stood again, hands folded respectfully. Miss Ellis, he said, I want to personally apologize on behalf of Meridian International. Your treatment was unacceptable. As a gesture of goodwill, we'd like to offer complimentary presidential-level accommodations at any Meridian property for the next 2 years. Naomi tilted her head slightly. I'm not interested in free rooms, she said. I want to know how you're changing your system. What will you do next time, when the guest isn't me? When she doesn't have a direct line to your executive board? The man nodded, expression serious. We're implementing a full internal audit and expanding our inclusivity training. But we'd also like to offer something else. We want you as a consultant, to help design our new hospitality equity program. Naomi paused, eyes narrowing slightly. You want me to fix what your system allowed? No, he replied. We want to follow your lead so it doesn't happen again. She said nothing at first. Then finally, send the paperwork. Morning sunlight streamed through the panoramic windows of the presidential suite as Naomi Ellis stood quietly by the glass, sipping the last of her coffee. The city below buzzed into life, unaware that a storm had passed through this room and left the building forever changed. The small white envelope on the desk still lay open. Inside was a typed letter, apologetic, formal, and, more importantly, actionable. It was signed by Meridian's CEO and included the offer to bring Naomi on board as a consultant for a new internal initiative, a full overhaul of their inclusivity and bias protocols across all global locations. She had flipped the letter over twice now, eyes skimming the final line more than once. Should you accept, we'll follow your lead. Naomi didn't smile often. It wasn't her style. But this time, there was a flicker, not of satisfaction, but of purpose. She folded the letter neatly and slid it into her briefcase. There was still work to be done, not just here, but everywhere this sort of thing happened without witness or consequence. She moved through the suite, gathering her things. The black leather briefcase clicked shut. The wheels of her carry-on glided across the hardwood floors. No regret lingered in her steps. No bitterness clung to her shoulders. This suite had not just been a place to rest, it had been a battleground. And she had not only held her ground, she had changed it. Downstairs, the energy in the lobby had shifted. Staff greeted her not with stiffness, but with sincerity. Eyes no longer darted away. There was respect in their glances, awareness in their posture. The doorman held the glass doors open personally. Naomi stepped into the early light. The black sedan she had ordered the night before was already waiting. As she settled into the back seat, the driver, a young man with an easy, respectful manner, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Everything all right, ma'am? Naomi fastened her seatbelt, placed the briefcase at her side, and nodded once. It will be. The sedan pulled away from the Grand Meridian, weaving through the streets of Chicago toward the airport. Behind her, on the 36th floor, policies were already being rewritten. Not because she demanded power, but because she refused to surrender it. For Naomi, this wasn't just about rooms or race or rage. It was about changing the architecture of entitlement, brick by brick, from within the very walls where it had long thrived. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't called for protest. She didn't need to. She had stood still, and let the system collapse around her silence. By the time Naomi's plane landed in San Francisco, her inbox was flooded. There were emails from journalists, some polite inquiries, others fishing for drama. Corporate liaisons had followed up with preliminary documentation for the advisory role Meridian had offered. Avery had already drafted a proposal for Naomi to review. But the most striking messages came from strangers, other women, other professionals, many of them black, who had heard fragments of what happened through the whisper networks of corporate America. One email subject line read, "Thank you for not moving." Naomi sat in the back of her rideshare, gazing out at the golden glow over the Bay Bridge as those words echoed in her head. She had almost forgotten that standing her ground, something she'd learned to do 1,000 quiet times before, could ripple so far and wide when seen, truly seen, for what it was. At home, her penthouse apartment welcomed her with minimalist serenity. Clean lines, soft textures, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the city skyline. She dropped her briefcase on the console and slipped off her heels, but her mind was already buzzing. The notebook came out again. She wasn't finished. Over the next few days, Naomi turned that one confrontation into a blueprint. She broke down the entire experience, entry to exit, and analyzed where the breakdowns happened, at the front desk, in employee assumptions, in the VIP program's unchecked privilege systems, in the absence of any escalation process that centered justice over appeasement. The proposal she sent back to Meridian wasn't just a policy recommendation. It was a strategic overhaul. "You don't fix bias with brochures," she wrote in her executive summary. "You fix it with training, transparency, and teeth. Consequences must be clear. Power structures must be audited. Loyalty shouldn't protect discrimination, it should be earned by accountability." Within 48 hours, Meridian's board approved the first draft. They requested a call, then a meeting. Naomi didn't just accept. She set the terms. She would lead a 6-month consultancy. Her scope would cover frontline hospitality protocols, executive leadership training, and a legacy guest code of conduct policy, to be piloted in 3 of their flagship hotels. The woman they tried to move out of a room would now help rewire the entire room's foundation. But Naomi wasn't looking for a seat at the table anymore. She was building a new one. And then something unexpected happened. A call came in, blocked number. Naomi debated ignoring it, but something told her to answer. "Ms. Ellis," came a shaky voice. This is Claire Jacobs. I'm Mrs. Langford's personal assistant. I know I shouldn't be calling, but I just..." Naomi's posture shifted. Claire hesitated. "She's not well. Not emotionally. She's furious, humiliated. She's been spiraling. And I'm not asking for sympathy. I just thought you'd want to know, she's telling everyone that you set her up." Naomi's brow raised. "Set her up? She says you planned it, that you manipulated the system to embarrass her." There was a pause. "I just wanted to say. I was there, Ms. Ellis. Outside the door. I heard everything. You didn't provoke her. She did it to herself." Naomi let the silence linger. "Thank you for telling me," she finally said, and hung up. She didn't need vindication. She'd already won. But the call reminded her how fragile entitlement became when it was forced to reckon with consequences. Victoria Langford wasn't the villain in Naomi's story, she was the product of a system that made her believe she could never be held accountable. Now she was learning. And so was the world watching. Weeks passed. The public never got the full story, not in headlines, not in press conferences. Meridian International released a short but decisive statement. Effective immediately, all senior staff will undergo enhanced bias and inclusivity training. Guest dispute protocols are under review. A new Equity and Ethics Advisory Board is being formed under the guidance of an external consultant. They never named Naomi Ellis. They didn't have to. The story moved through back channels. It whispered through boardrooms and climbed ladders built on quiet gatekeeping. In high-level networking circles, it became the Meridian incident. The woman who refused to move. The guest who didn't yell but still made the walls shake. Naomi didn't chase recognition. That wasn't the point. But she saw the shift. She saw it in the way people asked better questions. In how CEOs she'd once struggled to get a meeting with were suddenly reaching out. "We'd love your input on our culture audit. Can we bring you in to speak to our leadership team? I heard what happened, and how you handled it. You're exactly the kind of voice we need." She accepted the offers that mattered, the ones that brought systemic impact. The ones that came with listening, not just funding. Meanwhile, Meridian's own transformation had begun. Naomi flew to their headquarters for a closed-door executive summit. She didn't sugarcoat her presentation. "This isn't just about race," she said, standing before a room of board members and regional directors. "It's about assumptions. Who you believe deserves comfort. Who gets the benefit of the doubt. Who you're willing to inconvenience, and who you're not." No one interrupted her. Not even once. Afterward, a senior VP approached her in private. His face was flushed, his voice low. I just wanted to say, my daughter's black. She's 8. And I think about how many spaces I've taken her into, thinking she'd be safe, without questioning if the system saw her as fully deserving of being there. Thank you, for not moving. That phrase again. It followed her everywhere now. Not just words. A symbol. Not moving had become a stand-in for standing tall. For refusing to shrink. For holding space without apology. Back in Chicago, word reached Naomi through a discreet message that Victoria Langford had attempted to sue the hotel for breach of contract and emotional distress. The case was dismissed before it ever reached a judge. Victoria faded from the loyalty boards, from the elite traveler forums, from the rooms she once dominated. Her name no longer carried weight, it carried warning. And yet, Naomi didn't celebrate her fall. She understood something deeper. Systems don't break with noise. They break with precedent. And now, precedent had been set. On a brisk fall morning, Naomi Ellis stood once again in the lobby of the Grand Meridian. This time, she wasn't checking in. She had been invited back, not as a guest, but as an honored speaker. The hotel was hosting its first ever internal leadership summit on ethical hospitality, and Naomi was the keynote. Staff filled the velvet-lined chairs, from housekeepers to managers, front desk reps to corporate officers. All eyes were on her as she stepped onto the small, elevated platform near the grand staircase, the same one she'd walked past when her presence was once treated like an inconvenience. She didn't hold notes. She didn't need to. I'm not here to talk about what happened in Suite 3601, Naomi began. You already know that story. You know how quickly assumptions can turn into actions, how silence can equal complicity. I'm here to talk about what happens next. What you choose to do when no one's watching. When the person being mistreated doesn't have a direct line to your board. The room was still. You don't need a badge or a title to be the reason someone feels welcome, or rejected. You just need to choose differently than those before you. You need to see who's in front of you, not who you expect, but who's actually there. She paused. That's how we make progress. Not just by apologizing after harm, but by ensuring it doesn't happen again. Applause didn't erupt. Not right away. But one by one, people rose to their feet, quiet, solemn, intentional. It wasn't the applause of performance. It was acknowledgement. Growth. Change. Later that evening, as Naomi exited through the lobby, she passed a framed photograph hanging on a newly curated Voices of Change wall. It displayed influential speakers who had helped shape Meridian's culture. There she was. Naomi Ellis. No quote beneath it. Just her name. Because her actions had already spoken. Outside, a light drizzle touched the pavement. Naomi raised her umbrella, calm and composed, and made her way to the waiting car. Inside the vehicle, the driver, a young black woman with locks wrapped in a silk scarf, glanced back with a smile. You're her, aren't you? She asked, almost in awe. Naomi looked up, surprised. Her. The woman nodded. The woman who didn't move. Naomi let out a soft, knowing breath. She smiled, not with pride, but with quiet resolve. That's me, she said. But I'm not the last. And as the car merged into the flow of the city, Naomi Ellis faded into the evening light, steady, composed, and entirely unmovable. In a world that still too often tells people to shrink, Naomi Ellis stood still, and forced the system to shift. Her quiet defiance wasn't just personal victory, it became the foundation for institutional change. As she proved, you don't need to shout to make a statement. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do, is not move. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's simply refusing to disappear. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar? Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to True Echo, where every story echoes truth, resilience, and justice. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful episode.